So Brooke Shaden, photo artist, fairly well known. Let me. What I want to do. I want to make the window just a little bit. I'm having so much trouble. Okay, now her work is characterized by this very sort of painterly aesthetic to it. And the way she uses Photoshop to manipulate her images, they're photo based, but again, turning them into more sort of, they function in this kind of painterly drawing illustration way. Some, using a little bit more photographic imagery or a little more photographic feel to it. But, and you can see here, very sort of fanciful, out of the head, not meant to sort of be realistic in any way. Um, and very finished looking work, not exactly my favorite work. I think it's a little, this one I sort of like, when we talk about portraits and doing unusual uh, objects and things, some of these are fairly simple. You take a portrait, um, which I'm guessing is just a portrait against this background with this person with their hands. I don't even know if they're painted red when they do it, but maybe they are. And then you just shoot those hands several times and you bring those into Photoshop and you piece it together and make something that looks like this. Um, so, again, like we saw with the Alex Stoddard work, it's about planning. It's about thinking about what you want and how to go about getting there. And you'll see people doing a lot of very similar things. So, kind of the exploding head before, the head coming up, you see her using some of the same sort of tropes or ideas over and over again. Um, some more Photoshop looking than others. And again, that is sort of up to you to decide what it is you're trying to do. Are you trying to make things that are more dreamlike? One of the reasons why I show you the Brooke Shaden images is, and it's not because I like them that much. I do respect how much work has been put into them. An image like this I think is pretty nice, and using the drops, I like the painterly quality to them. Especially a sort of simple one like this. That it, it- you know, I think it's subtle. It's sort of open ended in its meaning. Uh, So I don't want to say that I completely don't like them, but they're probably not work I would have in my home. I don't know. This one's kind of nice, depending on how big it were printed and stuff. Um, but if you look her up online, she does a lot of work about creativity. Um, it's part of her thing. Where do ideas come from? How do people get their ideas? How do they start something and then push it and push it to the next thing? And again, it's kind of it's nice to hear somebody talk about their practice and how they go about it and what they're thinking about and trying to do. But you can see this work, sort of some of it's a little all over, like this one I just don't like at all. Um, some I think are far more interesting, but you'll also see that a lot of artists do very similar things. So we saw the Boyd Webb photos, which were from years before, it may have even been before she was born. But you see that sort of use of material. You see people standing on ladders on things. You see this combine these backgrounds. Um, so it very much, we've seen the work of Jerry Uelsmann, which, he was making work when I was born. So way before some of these people were born. And you see some of the same things coming out. It's like music. How many love songs can you have? Well, I don't know because they haven't finished writing them yet. They still keep making them and making them. So same thing with this kind of work. How many pools of water with hands in them? We saw Kyle Thompson's, we've seen Alex Stoddard, we've seen people do these same sort of things over and over again, but in slightly different ways. You know, and so it's not that you have to do something completely new. It's about coming up with that idea, something that connects to other people, something that tells your story or your point of view. You know, a lot of your work right now, I see people going for sort of funny one-liners and using Photoshop to make these, you know, kind of very easy hits. The hard part is finding the subtlety in that. Yes, you can have, I don't know. Okay, the old saying, just because you have a hammer doesn't mean you have to hit everything as hard as you can. Sometimes you want to use that hammer just to nudge things. Sometimes you want to smack things. Sometimes you don't even want to use the hammer. You just because you have it doesn't mean you have to use it. And that's what I feel like telling people when they start working in Photoshop. You know, and even I get overwhelmed, like, oh, I can do this or I can do that. Yes, you can, but what works best for your images? Okay, so that is the work of Brooke Shaden. I wanted to take a little bit of time to show you some of these other people. And as we're talking about the landscape interventions, I wanted you to see how different people respond to the landscape. And, you know, some of these are just all over the place. Um, it's like, several of you would have taken this photo and I'd go, okay, that's nice, but so what? I could see it being used. I wish there was something else being done to it. Obviously a lot of Photoshop work on this, not so much interesting pose here. So you can see this person trying to figure out their language. You can see that they're trying a bunch of different things. People floating in water is sort of this standard thing that keeps coming up. The idea of floating, people in nature, uh, nude bodies in different environments, the sole person against the landscape. And you can see, trying to decide, is it better close up or further away? So I want you to see that it isn't that everything people make is great and that people are out there trying all sorts of different things. Again, the nude body in the landscape, the solo person from far away, the person coming up from underground, passed out next to a pool of water. All of these things we've seen, the addition of flames, but it's now, okay, we can do these things. What is that you're doing with them? Are they interesting? How can you push that to the next level? And what I like about this, looking at somebody's work, is you see them trying all these sorts of different things, and which is what I would hope you start thinking about with your work. Okay, here's the forest. I can just shoot the forest, or I can think about adding somebody or something into it. How does that work best? This one here, the face covered as the person's falling, using it fast shutter speed. This just a goofy portrait, Um, so you can see the stuff all over the place here. Um, you can see much more portrait-like, a whole different sort of feel to it, much more blingy glam, a lot of boobs in this one. Again, trying different things out. How this one fits in, I don't know. We haven't looked at the work of Ryan McGinnis, but some of it feels like that. Yeah, it's Disneyland, but it's actually sort of an interesting photograph of Disneyland. Sort of fashion versus landscape. So I want you to understand it's not that you just have an idea and go out and shoot it. It's about trying different things. It's about trying something new, working through an idea, laying it out, coming back to it, stealing parts from other people, trying different things. Um, we saw the work of Kyle Thompson. Now, I think this one's kind of interesting, but I just can't stand these little fairy-like ones, that just look so dropped in Photoshop to me that, because there's no shadow on them. There's just some things missing in those. Whereas I find this much more interesting, um, these just seem a little too cute and sophomoric. playing on myths and things like that, but I like the effort being put in, the big dresses, the backgrounds, thinking about all of that. That to me is the interesting part. Not all of them have to work. Some of them are going to work, some of them aren't. And I want you to be comfortable with that is what's going to happen. Um, no, it's the one that wasn't there. These a little more straightforward photo, but the use of props and you know these border a little more goofy. They're a little more guy humor, I guess, in them, kind of a little bit all over the place. So I guess what I'm trying to get you to understand is, it's good to look at other people's work, to sort of explore, to see what other people are doing, to see how some of the things they're doing, or the lighting, or the setups, or the props might relate to some of the things that you want to do or work on. Or you can take this and go, I really like that part, but I don't like this. I want to redo this photograph, or I want to steal this piece, or whatever it is. Don't be afraid to do it, especially now, you know. So, all right, that's kind of it for me for today. I wanted you, though, to understand that looking at people's work from all sorts of levels, from, I tend to show sort of more accomplished people, photographers, being written about and having museum shows and that kind of stuff. But there are always people working at different levels, and that it's about, you don't just go from one day to not making a photograph to making good photographs. It's not like lightning hits you and you're an artist and everything you make is great. It's building the language. It's about trying and going over it again and again and pushing your ideas and going back and forth. All right. I think that's it for me for today. I'm just sort of on my rant. So